you read off all the things that a religion states to one of its own believers, but you tell them that it's a foreign religion, and you see how allergic their reaction is. Know that there's a talking donkey in the Bible. Oh, and by the way, you're talking about God regretting things. The first instance in the Bible where it says he regretted he did something and repented of something was him repenting that he ever created human beings.
Well, no, that was a different occasion. And then he felt bad because, of course, that he created it. He didn't do it right. He made a mistake. He had to do a do-over, so he erased everything and then did it over again, and they were still screwed up. So then he sends his hand puppet self to right the wrong that he could have written without having the hand puppet. And then after having done the ultimate sacrifice and all like this, nothing changed. And people still die and people still sin. Can this guy not get anything right the first time?
Well, it's not just the first time, is it? As you rightly say, after flooding the earth and saving the one virtuous family, the first thing they did, obviously, amongst other things, including incest, was for Noah to build a vineyard, get pissed, and masturbate in front of his children.
Yeah, and then it was like maybe a decade later that he has to wipe out everybody in the city because the only guy worth saving was the guy that got drunk with his daughters and got them both pregnant.
Oh, yeah, that was after he'd saved them, though. It wasn't his fault because he didn't know that it had happened.
Oh yes, once his wife was conveniently removed from the picture, he blamed his daughters for getting him drunk, and they molested him. Faith is expecting you to believe all kinds of impossible things, and I remember one of the true statements made in Inherit the Wind, one of the things that actually came from the real trial, where William Jennings Bryan says, if the Bible said that Jonah had swallowed the whale, I would believe it. There again, that's where you got this pretend thing, where you refuse to admit ever that you're wrong. But when I'm reading the Bible and I come to that bit about Lot being molested by his daughters, I got to raise an eyebrow. It doesn't matter if I believe the rest of the book. And I could come to that part and I'm like, no, that asshole is lying.
Well, and the thing about it is it was one city that was destroyed. It wasn't like the flood where everyone was destroyed. They really could have walked a little further.
It was two, wasn't it? It was.
Yeah.
Okay, Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
But they
it
probably
was Vegas and Atlantic City.
Exactly. They could have walked a little further to find more men to have sex with and reproduce. They really didn't have to turn to dear old dad. I'm pretty sure.
Well, you're hanging out in a cave. What else are you going to do?
You people, you don't watch enough Jerry Springer.
I think the problem was that Lot's daughters really just weren't very attractive. I mean, he did throw them out into a mob of rapists, and they apparently remained untouched, so they must have been, yeah.
And what better way to show their appreciation for having been fed to a rape mob than to molest their dad? What part of the story is believable? It's like the entirety of the Old Testament and portions of the New Testament as well are a testament to child abuse, to promotion of child abuse. I mean, from the parts where you're cutting them out of women's bodies, you're slaughtering all the little boys, keeping the preteen girls for yourself for sexual purposes, obviously, since you left no other option, for eating your children or stoning them when they're misbehaving, and molesting them, throwing them to a rape mob. I will kill the first thing that comes out of the front door. Oh, look, it's one of my family members. Who expected that to come out of my front door? I don't understand. And how anybody forces themselves to believe it, and it's all based on a notion of child abuse, where you will favor the delusion over your own children and be ready to kill your own spawn if the schizophrenic visions tell you to.
And William Lane Craig, who we invited but unfortunately didn't show up, could tell you this better than anyone. It wasn't that the nubile young women were spared for sexual purposes. What happened was they were the only ethical people in the Canaanite civilization. When Moses and later Joshua came in, the men were evil, the older women the deflowered women were evil, the elderly were evil, the children, the little infants were evil, the livestock and the crops were all evil, and they all needed to be destroyed. But somehow, by the grace of Almighty God, all of the sexy young girls were just very virtuous and good enough in God's eyes to continue living.
Well, haven't you noticed that any time barbarians ransack a village, it's always the sexy young girls that get spared, every time. Grandma and Grandpa, the cattle, everything else is wiped out.
Because they're...
Well, maybe not the cattle.
Girls in their early to mid-teens are the most virtuous, honest people in any society.
On that note, can I welcome can I welcome the next caller? I hope it's Joel. Are you with us, Joel?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you very well. How can we help you, sir?
Right. It's something that's been going through my mind for a while, and you kind of brought it up earlier in the show. This thing that a lot of people have these very different, even within a single religion, will have incredibly divergent views on what their God is and what it's like. To the point at which, has been pointed out several times, Christianity has 38,000 denominations at least, and even within each of those denominations you get, divergent groups and things. To the point at which, I've often heard, I think perhaps it was Thunderfoot, I can't remember, said that, I think I heard it on the Atheist Experience as well, that you've never met two theists who believe in the same God. Because as you go through all of the attributes that are supposedly held by this God, you will not find any list. The longer you make the list, the less likely it is that two theists will agree on it. To the point at which you can essentially say that each theist believes in a different God. I think the problem that a lot of these theists don't tend to recognize about this is that if their theology is based on that salvation, or whatever they want to say, is dependent upon belief in that God, and what do they say if a God returns and it's almost but not quite the God that they believe in, is that God going to condemn them because they didn't quite believe in the exact right kind of God? And I think it's interesting just to get really, really specific about this. And I think pointing out this whole image of God thing is a good example of this, that there is no definitive answer of what this God is because it doesn't exist. So
it clearly exists in the minds of its believers, I think, but it exists as a personal entity. It's very subjective. Concordance.
Yeah, didn't South Park do something on this where they had someone visit hell, and it turns out that the Mormon guy was the right one all along, and so all these really devout people are floating around like Michael Landon, I think is one of the images, because obviously he didn't believe in the Mormon God, so he wasn't doing it correctly, and all the things that he had done wrong would have added up to never being saved truly. That's a good point.
I did one where Jesus comes back and he's only 4 feet tall because people were all shorter that day, back in the day. And people can't stop making jokes about it.
Michael, have you got any observations on this?
I was thinking of the South Park where God comes down and he's like a little monkey creature thing. No, I think, actually you bring up an excellent point, one that I've never actually heard good answers to, which is what exactly it means to believe in God. Does it mean acting in the right way, or does it mean getting the specifics right, or the details correct? It seems to be just that you believe, actually it's not even clear in any sort of way exactly what belief actually means. I think this image of God issue actually brings us forward, too, is not only just what we're believing, but when we say belief in God, but also what is the nature of belief, or how do we interpret that issue. It's a glaring hole in this entire theistic account of exactly what that means. I don't have any solid answers. I think you'd need a theist to actually explain that. And I was actually never religious.
The point I would like to make is that if you ask a theist, do you think you believe in the right God? If they say yes, then okay, then you're probably the only person that believes in that God that you believe in. So if your God is the right God, you're the only person that's going to get saved. Congratulations.
Well, it's also sort of annoying when people, it's like a common thing I've heard from apologists or just everyday Christians, that the true miracle of Christianity is that thousands of authors over thousands of years could write on a single topic and come to perfect agreement. And it's like, no. They're incredibly divergent accounts. They're mutually incompatible in some cases.
I think that's what Thunder was going on about, was how science tends to converge in on a smaller and smaller margin of error, whereas with religion it seems like the margin of error gets larger and larger over time. If we went back to the original Christianity, there were only just a few small versions or sects, and then as time has gone on, we've gotten tens of thousands. Sorry.
Even the early sects absolutely hated each other and would cut each other's throats every chance that they got. I mean, people don't... Arianism hasn't left its mark on Christianity, but back in the day, that was the major thing. Is you had the Nicene Christians and the Arians, and they were the first real major denominations, and they went to war with each other as often as possible. I mean,
There's something like 30,000 different incarnations of Christianity alone as a religion. Yeah. So clearly, they're not coalescing into one cohesive unit. There is no. It would be difficult to even define what Christianity is.
I'll tell you what it looks like to me. It looks like an evolving, like the classic tree of evolution, splintering off and getting more and more diverse over time. It never
is biologically like that.
Yeah,
I've seen a kind of a cladogram for the different denominations when they did the attack on the Waco stronghold, or whatever you want to call that. They were talking about what division of the branch Davidians they were, and where they offshoot from, and the Seventh-day Adventists and where they offshoot from, and what part of Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever other group they belong to. And so it was very much like a biological cladogram.
There was this point earlier about, sorry, Digger, but the Native Americans not knowing anything about Jesus. I always ask them, Christians, how come when the Spaniards arrived in the New World, the natives didn't see the ships and say, "Oh, foreigners! I can't wait to tell them about Christ," and just rush out into the beach to meet them, to convert the incoming missionaries to Christianity. It's amazing. It's like taking a little eyedropper, by the use of Middle Eastern prophets, a little eyedropper, and dropping it into a lake and hoping that what you were dropping spreads throughout the entire body of water. It's just silly.
And why then?
I thought
and
Joseph
why there?
Smith
And why
explained
those people?
why the Indians had forgotten.
do explain what he said, Aaron.
No, I was saying Joseph Smith explained why the Indians had forgotten when Jesus came to visit them in the Americas. And then they have this another little tribal conflict, and so the people that were following that point were basically killed off, and so there weren't any people that still remembered having met Jesus in the Americas. At the point when Jesus died on the cross, he reappeared in South America and met a bunch of Indians, and they were Jewish people that had been there 600 years already.
So wait, God's followers in the New World, they suffered a complete military defeat?
Exactly.
Well, wait, did
the
the pagan Native Americans have iron atlatls?
Probably very
I don't think
likely.
we should be allowed to say that word anymore. Let's just toss out atlatls. No more.
Don't forget what God's chosen people have to go through. I mean, everybody that goes on a mission from God gets a ration of crap on him, and it's like what? It's like the Blues Brothers. They're on a mission from God, so all these things fall apart and everything blows up, and everyone's out to kill them. It's just like a biblical story. It's everybody that goes on a mission from God encounters that sort of a thing. When you walk from Thebes or Cairo to Canaan, it's going to take you about 2 weeks. If you have 100 people with you, it might take you a month. But if you have God's guidance, it'll be 40 years before you get to El Paro, even though you only have to wander along a coastline that entire way and couldn't possibly get lost.